March 2020, the world changed.
Breaking news tonight, millions of Americans ordered to shelter in place as the coronavirus pandemic spreads.
November 2021, the world tentatively has reopened. Schools are back in session, downtowns are once again filling up, and people are going, often reluctantly, sometimes just part-time, back to the office. But in many ways, the world has changed forever. We feel disruption in every part of our lives. On this week's special edition of Montclair News Lab, we'll explore focus, disruption, how the pandemic has affected how we learn,
making sure that the classroom experience is always valuable,
our mental health,
70% of respondents wrote that their mental health took a toll due to the pandemic,
and how we work.
How much do they have to be paid before it's worth their while to go back to work?
Your school, your news, all this and more on this special edition of Montclair News Lab. Focus, disruption, the kickoff.
Hi, and welcome to the Focus Disruption Kickoff. My name is Brittany Stegwa.
And I'm Louis Bianchilillo. Today we're covering everything that's changed since the pandemic hit all across the world.
And it has been a lot. Like we just previously said, this is a collaboration event between all the student organizations here at the School of Communication and Media, News Lab, the Montclarian, WMSC, and Red Hawk Sports Network.
And we'll be going through tons of different topics, and that includes education, misinformation, and so much more.
Now, let's get started. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's take a look at the big picture. Giovanna Boggins, a producer here, is going to take us through a story of a woman who was affected through the pandemic in more ways than one.
Meet Jessica Bober. She was a makeup artist at Bloomingdale's when COVID-19 hit in March 2020 and was put on furlough.
There wasn't like a whole lot of information about what was going to happen. It was just like, we're shutting down, you're still going to get paid.
Months later, after she found out she was pregnant, she went back to work. But it took tolls, wearing a mask and worrying if her clients were infected while being in close contact with them. She feared for her safety and that of her unborn child.
Very stressful and dangerous and scary. And I'm not saying it was like any less so for anybody else, but I also was pregnant, so I was freaking out all the time.
Then, a month after returning to work, she developed preeclampsia, prenatal hypertension. Bober was put on bed rest and had doctor visits where she worried about becoming infected. But that wasn't the end of her troubles. At 37 weeks, she had an emergency C-section. She and her husband's hearts dropped when their baby was born and did not make a sound.
Oh my God, it was terrifying because he didn't cry.
Fortunately, her son Oscar's breathing stabilized. Her plan was to return to work and have her husband's parents watch the baby, but her in-laws contracted COVID-19. Her mother-in-law recovered, but her father-in-law is still battling long-term effects.
It affected his brain somehow, and that's something that we're still dealing with and he's still recovering from.
With no money for daycare or jeopardizing her child's health,
A brand new baby, wasn't going to risk that.
Bober quit her job to take care of her son. No unemployment checks and income only from her husband, this family could not afford to live on their own and moved in with her husband's parents. Bober's year and a half of misfortune tracked the havoc that COVID was wreaking on the country. Job loss, financial insecurity, fear, stress, a breakdown of everything normal. Shea Richburg is a futurist, a person who studies patterns to make predictions about the future. She says we can expect to become less reliant on other people and more on technology.
So everything is about connecting us all over. And the way to do that is through the internet. So you're going to see that change. You're also going to see a lot more learning through technology.
Richburg foresees a mixed future. People working at home some days and in the office on others. Park Rhodes, an education technology futurist, says virtual or augmented tools will become commonplace. We can all bring each other back together into one room and experience something. Through augmented reality, users can visualize themselves in an environment, possibly through a smartphone. Virtual reality users wear goggles and are instantly in another place. But it goes further. Imagine chips implanted in people that are connected to medical computers that provide constant analysis of your health. As for Bober, she is working as a freelance makeup artist and her family of 3 is settling into living with her in-laws. She's optimistic, but realistic.
It's just like taking reluctant steps to try and keep our heads above water. But, we have to do what we have to do.
For Montclair News Lab, I'm Giovanna Boggins.
With us today is Dr. Luis Portes from the Feliciano School of Business in the Department of Economics. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Portes.
Luis, a pleasure to be back.
And we've spoken plenty of times about economics.
Plenty, right at the beginning.
Exactly. So things have completely changed in the past 2 years. One of the biggest things that's changed in the world of economics is people wanting to work from home. Can you speak about why they want to do that?
Yeah, actually I was thinking about the name of the program today. I would call it Reset.
Reset.
Actually, what has happened in society, and not only in the US, but everywhere in the world too, people have taken a different approach to what they used to believe, think, and want to do. So in that regard, the job place, it's a different location now. So going to the office, it's a matter of debate, it's a matter of safety in a different dimension than before. So that basically has been the difference. There's a structural shift towards what we used to consider normal, and it's a reset where people are taking different decisions.
And there's always going to be some people that have to go into the office, right?
Yes, there is, and actually, as you introduced me, I'm in economics. One thing that we get sort of ahead of time to see where things are moving towards is pricing. Right before coming to the program, I was having lunch watching TV, the financial channel, and there's an increase in rents in New York after dropping very largely.
A lot.
With people upgrading for a lower price.
Right.
Now it's increasing again, and one of the reasons is that big companies are renting space, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and they are expecting some people to work there as well. So there is demand for commercial space and the people that are going to occupy that space.
So you think there's going to be a shift in the city of how we do business?
Yeah, I guess it's the frequency of showing up to the office that will be changing. Now, almost everywhere, and surveys of CEOs, what they show is that they want people in the office. It's the spontaneous coming up with ideas, the camaraderie, people that you don't get to speak as often as you do on Zoom, you run into each other. So there is a back to the office movement that won't be as strong as before, but surely it won't disappear.
If everybody's working from home, does that change the way that a business runs? Because like you said, you don't have that spontaneousness.
Yeah, there are a bunch of studies going up. Some are saying, well, because there's more of transaction costing, coordinating people, delegating. In some cases, they have found a decrease in productivity. But in other cases, since people have more energy, first because they don't need it to commute, and they have more time, productivity has increased in other studies. So it's still mostly out there. What is going to be the final effect? Most studies shift more towards it's going to be beneficial for companies in terms of their output.
And I know sometimes we're seeing some people work 2 days a week in the office, 3 days home, things like that. Is that the new normal, the quote unquote new normal?
Yeah, let's call it like that.
Okay.
Yeah, a hybrid system of both. And people lean towards 2 or 3 days a week in the office.
So has anything else changed? We know that a lot has changed, but what else has changed since the pandemic with businesses and working?
Yeah, the bigger thing that has everybody worried for the implications of it has been the drop in participation of people in informal jobs. So the labor force participation rate, as it is called, has decreased. People were expecting that once Labor Day came and the federal unemployment insurance top-off would disappear, people will show up again for work and looking for jobs, and they haven't. So that is one thing that has disrupted not only the general economy, but specific sectors that compound on each other. Just the example of the automobile industry. There was the chip shortage, right? Car companies needed chips to make cars.
Right.
Then you have the supply chain bottlenecks on ports. where ships are stranded in the Pacific Ocean.
The whole supply chain. And you know what, Dr. Portes, I'm going to be talking about that in our next story
super.
Here. So it is always a pleasure speaking with you.
Same, Luis.
Thank you so much for coming in. I wish I could shake your hand, but things have changed a little bit.
Distance.
Little fist bump.
Take care, Luis. Thank you very much.
So everything has changed in the workforce, and that includes people not going into work like we were speaking about, but also there has been a labor shortage. I set out to find out what's going on and when it's going to end. This is the Rathskeller on Montclair State's campus, the former home of the university's pizza place and made-to-order salad station. They haven't seen customers since before the pandemic. But why? It's all part of a larger nationwide labor shortage that's interrupted business everywhere.
As America reopens, many businesses now face a new challenge, bringing back workers and doing it quickly.
They are desperate to find workers, especially in the food business in New York City.
According to Dr. David Axelrod, an instructional specialist at the Feliciano School of Business, there's something bigger at play.
In labor economics, we use the concept of a reservation wage. Like, how much do they have to be paid before it's worth their while to go back to work?
Reservation wage increased in the past 2 years. That's due to a variety of factors, like office safety, childcare, and certain employees not wanting to commute to work. Ashler Salam, the director of operations for 2 Philly pretzel factory locations, says the issue stems much farther from their own team of employees. The supply chain has been interrupted internationally.
There's just less people picking specific kinds of jobs anymore that allow all this stuff to kind of gel together.
It's going to take 10 days to offload the 6,200 containers on this ship alone.
The pipeline of goods from China to the U.S. consumer is running at the pace of a turtle.
They need truck drivers to show up. They need orders to be put in to get these goods onto the highway and into stores.
It affects not only what we're ordering, we don't even know sometimes what we're actually going to be receiving, and then we have to adjust on the fly.
The U.S. is facing bottleneck after bottleneck in the supply chain, and these delays are causing slowdowns across almost every industry. Ports are struggling to keep up with their shipments.
The Port of Los Angeles announced today that it's going to begin operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Today's announcement has the potential to be a game changer.
Despite the president's announcement, dock workers are reportedly being called into work the same amount they were prior to it. And even if that plan did take action, there's another issue. There's a trucker shortage of over 80,000 workers, preventing goods from getting to where they need to be.
We're just used to, you go into the store and there's the finished product. As long as you got the money, you get it.
As for Ashler Salam, the Philly pretzel factory director, the current situation is twisting his business like a pretzel.
But if we keep raising prices, it doesn't mean we'll lose everybody, but then they'll come less frequently.
An economy struck by a worldwide pandemic that's affecting everyone.
Thanks, Louis. I'm now joined by Dr. Christopher McKinley, who's a professor here at Montclair State and an expert on how mental health is affected by social media. Thanks for joining us, Dr. McKinley. So my first question is, how has the increase in social media affected our mental health during the pandemic?
Well, there's always been, for years now, there's been research looking at the links between social media and mental health. And there is a small negative relationship between social media and poor mental health, which seems surprising, right? If you think about increasing feelings of loneliness and depression. Prior to COVID-19, one of the arguments was that it was related to social comparison. So people comparing themselves to others on social media that were doing all these fun, cool things, and they felt like they were maybe missing out. During COVID, there's some other explanations that we could talk about. One being this issue about the information that people are getting, all the misinformation is creating more uncertainty, increasing more levels of stress, anxiety. The other argument is that the relationship may be kind of flipped around, which is people feel more anxious, more stressed, more lonely, so they're using social media more. But it feeds into kind of that larger perception that perhaps there is this link. One of the things I think we don't clearly know is what aspects of social media are maybe triggering this decline in the concerns over mental health.
So obviously during the pandemic, we relied heavily on social media to stay connected with family, friends, even in school, we used Zoom. And you talked a little bit about this. Now, do you think that there are benefits to schooling with with online schooling and.
Okay, so a little bit in a different area in terms of education. Well, I mean, one of the things that in 2021 versus, this has happened in the 20th century or even 10 years ago, is at least we had a technology option to kind of complement existing situations. And in some contexts, it could be useful for individuals. So there's potential benefits of the online in certain contexts. But I think that, I'm not an education professional to kind of speak on that behalf, but I would say that the preference it seems to be for face-to-face learning in many cases. But of course, there are circumstances where people benefit from the option of an online experience.
And moving forward, we've seen different implications being input, like I know one thing called BetterHelp, which is a social media tool that it's helped with anxiety and helps connects therapists with patients. Do you think we're going to see a rise in that?
Yeah, and I think one thing that gets left out of this discussion, because there's so much focus seems to be on the negative relationship, is the potential for particularly more specific aspects of social media, or health even. We sometimes the mobile health apps in helping promote better mental health. And there is some valuable research on that and the potential positive impact. We're going to see people being more comfortable now using the technology because they were so dependent on it during COVID. They may actually benefit from the online sources of therapeutic resources and things of that sort.
Yeah, and being home, you talked about like comparisons a lot, and I personally, suffer from some mental health issues, and comparisons definitely hinder that. Do you think there's a way for people to confidently use social media without those negative effects hindering their mental health?
Sure. I mean, I think it obviously it comes from having a strong support network, but also the more media literate and kind of information literate we become, and being aware of the ways in which people present themselves in very strategic, selective ways in those platforms, and just kind of reflecting on that can be very useful in various ways. And I think we can think about ways in which we use social media for very targeted reasons, and trying to chat with our friends and family members about kind of the maybe unrealistic presentations that are there as well, to kind of ward off some of the negative effects.
So do you think that this is something that should be taught maybe in schools, maybe in college, have a certain social media class?
Right. Well, I think it broadly connects to media literacy, which is a theme that I think in the school we try to promote in many ways. But I think, and this is something I talk about in my classes, whether that should be actually implemented at a younger age, and I think absolutely so, given the high number of youth that use social media at a very young age.
Definitely.
And some of the concerns in terms of social media being linked to things like negative body image and things of that sort. There's a push from certain areas of the education community to integrate media literacy in middle school or high school, and I would be supportive of that. I think it'd be really beneficial for kids, and I think they'd be really drawn to it and interested in it. And the key aspect of that would be the social media element.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. McKinley, for joining us. I loved hearing your input.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, so the Montclarian is a newspaper here at the School of Communication and Media and our university newspaper. And reporter Emma Coughlin takes us into a meeting to show us how the Montclarian benefited from the pandemic and how they became better.
Okay, so I know that you guys were a lot more involved when everything shut down and COVID completely changed the Montclarian. Can you tell me what happened?
I had just started assistant entertainment editor. Then everything shut down, and my first thought was, oh, I just got this good thing going. Now what? What's gonna happen? I think that was like a huge question that everybody had, was just, now what?
For news, it was especially difficult to find stories to cover because we cover a lot of what's going on campus, and nobody's on campus.
So I know we went completely online. Do you think that was more of a problem in the beginning? And do you think it continued to be a problem, or do you think we're better from it?
I think that it's only helped us, because now we're posting throughout the week instead of saving it all for like a big news dump on Wednesdays before our paper comes out. We're posting every day, we're posting as things happen. We're getting more likes, or we're getting more views, we're getting more interactions. We're doing online ads, we're now doing social media ads. So I think it's only helped to expand Montclarian.
The one good thing about the pandemic has been watching us grow as like a digital organization and just really stepping up our social media, our website, and everything involved with that.
Because now we're not just reaching people that are walking by our stands on campus. We're reaching people, if we really wanted to, all over the country.
I think we really did a good job of kind of turning around everything and getting back to where we were, but also better than where we were.
Mm-hmm. Being back is so much fun. Last year I feel like we really missed out on that community, really close, tight-knit feel that I'm learning that we have. I mean, we've just been having a blast.
I think coming back and having that sort of team and community that we've built has been really awesome, and I'm actually really thankful for it on a personal level. It's just nice that all these people are here and we get to hang out and have fun, and then also create something really cool and be successful at it.
Yeah, I had never been in the office before. Honestly, now Wednesday's my favorite day of the week, our production days, because I just love seeing everybody and working on the paper and producing something that I'm really, really proud of. Mm-hmm. And I've made some of my best friends because of the Montclairian.
This year's focus is Focus Disruption, which is basically the effects of the pandemic on the world today. The topic itself, disruption, is very broad. How do we as an organization kind of plan on reporting that and being a part of that collaboration within the school?
There's so much to cover these days. There's so much that's been affected by COVID, and disruption really helps us get a variety of stories out there that really address student concerns and the way their lives are changing post-COVID.
No matter what, everybody's going to relate to it. This is something that everybody can care about because it's happened to everybody.
Do we have any goals as an organization in terms of covering focus?
I think the biggest thing is telling these stories and getting that human interest aspect. If that makes, a change, or it makes people want a change, then that's what it does, and I think that that's the beauty of journalism.
Every student has really been affected by COVID, and every student has a story to tell, and they're adapting to this new world. The world's changing and they're adapting to it, so I feel like it's our job to tell these stories and tell stories that students can relate to.
We're the student voice of Montclair. So I think that's kind of should be our goal, is just being a voice for them in a world that's not really listening.
We're coming back, we're doing our printed paper every week, so I mean, the pandemic kind of brought us down, but I think we're coming back stronger than ever.
Now, Louis, you and I are part of the News Lab team here in the School of Communication Media, and watching that, seeing how the Montclairian works their programs and how they come up with ideas, it was really interesting.
Absolutely, and since we've been here, new and innovative ideas have been coming back ever since we've been back to school from COVID.
Yes, and speaking of back to school, we're going to talk to Solana Brohl, who is going to show us how kids in high school and college accustomed to coming back to school after the pandemic.
When Patricia Sugling, a teacher at Warren County Technical School, returned to class, one thing about her students stood out.
They've lost what it means to be in a school and how one should act when they're there. We've been having a lot of kids doing things, following TikTok trends, things like that are just either illegal or just very inappropriate for a school.
Her students are not alone. K through 12 or university, educators are grappling with these transitions. Emily Isaacs is the executive director of the Office of Faculty Advancement at Montclair State University and specializes in teaching higher education.
We have to figure out how to make learning more active and engaging. One idea that's pretty popular and has been around for a while is this notion of flipped learning or active learning, where more time is spent in classroom in active learning, where you're talking to somebody next to you, where you're working on your math problem, getting feedback from your professor in real time in the classroom. So I think making sure that the classroom experience is always valuable.
Jocelyn Pearson, a senior at Warren County Technical School, had concerns of her own about returning to in-person classes.
It was very nerve-wracking at first because you really don't know what people are going to be like when you come back, because after such a long period, people can change, things can change. You haven't seen people, you haven't talked to people.
One big change, a much larger focus on mental health resources.
We've made a wellness room. We've hired another counselor that lives in the wellness room and is always there for kids to be able to come and talk or just take a break. We've added a therapy dog program. There's been a lot of resources on the education side, on the learning loss side.
The universities, including ours, they're hiring more psychologists, they're hiring more social workers. Now I think there's much more of an effort to have students have psychological support counseling while staying in school.
Some see a post-pandemic increase in kindness.
I like that people are more understanding of people, and that they understand that certain people, they don't want to be touched, they don't want to be close to others. Some people, they get anxious when there's a lot of people around. I like that we're taking actions now to clean places more, so now there's more sanitary factors.
I think it just is going to require patience and understanding. I know at our school, they're really looking at the whole student, not just grades and when things are due and whatnot. They're really factoring in the whole child, like I said. So I think that's something that, is going to have to continue to be the case.
For Montclair News Lab, I'm Solana Brohl.
Now, we've done our own research here at Focus Disruption. We asked our followers on Instagram how they were affected during the pandemic. Sarah DePippa reports.
Without a doubt, COVID-19 has affected our lives forever. On social media, we asked our followers how their lives have been disrupted. Let's take a look at what some of the students had to say. User 1 wrote, "Mental health-wise, this past year has been terrible. I felt so disconnected from the outside and felt isolated. This sets someone who struggles with anxiety back by a lot." This was not the only student who said that their mental health was affected by the pandemic. 70% of respondents wrote that their mental health took a toll due to the pandemic. User 2 wrote, "My mental health absolutely declined. I broke out badly, my eating habits were changing, and living on campus that year was so depressing. The only time I'd leave my dorm was to get mandatory testing once a week. It was stressful and put a lot of tension on my roommate and I. Hashtag focus disruption." In terms of work and education being affected, students' college experiences were cut short and many were laid off from their jobs. User 3 wrote, "School has been disrupted the most. My major is hands-on and I felt like I was behind with my online classes." User 4 wrote, "I missed a year and a half of my college experiences. My parents are both essential workers, including my mom, who's a nurse, and my dad, who's a postal worker, whose benefits were threatened." If any of you related to the survey results, please comment on our Instagram page at Montclair State Focus using the hashtag #FocusDisruption and share how the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted your life. Thank you, and back to the News Lab.
Well, that's the end of our show, Focus Disruption, the kickoff.
It's the kickoff. We have our main Focus Disruption event. It's going to be in the spring, so you have that to look forward to. You get to see these smiling faces again, hopefully.
And we'd like to thank everyone who had anything to do with this production. That includes all the students involved in the control room, the professors, our reporters. Tune in next week for part 2 of this special edition of Montclair News Lab, Focus Disruption, the kickoff.
I do not like COVID-19. I couldn't have class parties, graduation. It just stopped everything.
You can spend time with your family, but you don't get to see your friends as much.
We can't touch. We have to do air hug. I don't really like it because I had to go on Zoom and I missed my friends.
My teachers being funny and seeing my friends.
Last year it really affected my schoolwork because I wasn't really getting it on the computer. You can't do like partner work. Everything's independent.
If you cough or you sneeze, you're gonna spread eardrums and they're gonna get sick. And so you have to make sure it covers like this part of your mouth. So if you're sick and you cough, the doctors won't get sick.
Put it on this ear.
would say that I can run out to recess and shoot hoops. We can easily communicate and now we don't have to do everything digital.